Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey, and hello, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey of this show that was designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor of co-hosting this show every week, usually with Craig Brown, who is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. However, today, it's just me, because today we aren't going technical. Today, we're going human. Today, we're going to talk about networking and why it is so important to your career. How you actually connect with other people at all stages will make a difference in how you find success. And every single week, we try to bring to this podcast really interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today I'm excited because I get a chance to interview my friend, Sarah Michel. Now, Sarah is the Vice President of Professional Connexity, and we're going to talk about what is Connexity at a company called Velvet Chainsaw. And they help organizations and associations figure out how to deliver more networking value at face-to-face conferences. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thanks, Thom. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. So, Sarah, I don't really go through and read bios. I like people to kind of talk about their own career journey. So can you give us a little background about yours?
Sure. So I started off in healthcare initially and worked in the human resources side, which then led me to career outplacement work. And I was doing that for a couple of big global outplacement firms for a while. And all along in that kind of process of interviewing and hiring people in HR and then going into career coaching work, the reality that networking and how to leverage a network was so foreign to so many people and so many of the executives that I worked with who just didn't understand the value of creating a network or even how to access one, put me on that path of then trying to really spread the good news that you and I both spread about the power of networking. So then I began my own speaking training, facilitation business. I did that for 15 years. So I was, on the circuit doing face-to-face meeting, being in either the opening keynote or concurrent session. And I discovered about 9 years ago when I started saying to the meeting planners, so what are you going to do to keep these connections going that I started in my session? Over the next 3 days, they would look at me with deer in the headlights and say something like, oh, we have alcohol tonight. Is that what you mean? Like, we're going to have a party. We're going to have a reception. Is that what you mean? No, that's not what I mean. And so I decided I wanted to get on the other side of the table and help meeting organizers figure out how to deliver more networking value. And I joined Velvet Chainsaw Consulting 7 years ago, if you can believe that.
Wow, 7 years ago.
7 years in February. And we get to do some really fabulous things. And there's, our whole team evaluates conference improvement, but my specialty is how do we design experiences before, during, and after event to leverage the networking and bring it up because it doesn't matter, PLM had the same results on their meeting. I saw that. I mean, everybody is coming to a conference today face-to-face for networking. That is the number one reason. Education is number two.
Well, absolutely.
You can get education online for free. What you can't get is what happens when we're face to face.
Absolutely. And you and I met through the National Speakers Association. So I've been doing the same thing. I've been speaking at conferences for 11 years, which totally blows me away that it's been so long. And one of the things that has been very important to me in my own career and in the stuff that I've done working with my clients is how do you convince people that this is important? You bring up a really interesting point when you said that when you were in the outplacement days, there were a lot of people who the idea of networking was really foreign to them. They didn't really understand exactly what they should be doing. And that sort of always freaked me out, that people didn't understand the value of that human connection. So you use the term Connexity. Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, so when I came to join a Velvet Chainsaw, we didn't want to say vice president of networking. And part of it is what you just hit on, is that networking is kind of a dirty word. I mean, a lot of people, it's very misunderstood. A lot of people have been victims of what I call network drive-bys. People drive by, suck the life out of you, and then they never return your phone call. And so people have been used and abused, and it's a bad word. And a lot of people that I met at PLM were kind of, that was a bad word, networking. And self-promotion, ooh, that sounds horrible. And so we were trying to come up with a different way of looking at it so that it's not a transactional mindset. It's a relationship-focused connection mindset. And we stumbled upon, in the early 80s, Silicon Valley programmers who were coming up with the very first online communities like MySpace. And it was early days in the 80s, and they took the word community and they took the word connecting and they merged them together, and they came up with this word Connexity. And that was kind of a buzzword for some of those earlier developers, and putting together that, how do we get people of like-mindedness to share online values and ideas? So we love that. We feel face-to-face meetings, we feel associations are in the Connexity business. That's what it's about. It's all about connecting and building a community. And so, but back to your point around, people don't understand networking. They approach it with a transaction mentality. And that's what I discovered in my early days coaching executives. I would say, have you thought of, getting them to think about their network? Have you thought about setting up a meeting with this person to get some, and they would look at me and say, well, they don't have a job for me. Why would I do that? Why would, and I was like, oh my God, you're missing the point. I mean, and so that's why we kind of have to turn the term a little bit on its ear, and that, the focus is on connecting and building relationships. The focus is on figuring out how you can be a resource to others, and looking at that, building that social capital that you have within your organization and your influence within your organization by being somebody that approaches their network kind of with their hands up, saying, how can I be a resource to you, rather than their hands down, clawing, saying, what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, especially during the recession, how many times did we see people who hadn't shown up in our communities, no matter what our communities were, who showed up with a stack of resumes, who walked around going, hi, remember me? My name's Becky. And it was like resume after resume. If you just show up when you need something, that doesn't build the long-term and mutually beneficial relationships. And I loved what you said about how people have this sort of this like negative feeling about the word networking, where if you actually go look it up in a dictionary, the definition is something along the lines of creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships where everyone involved finds more success. So when people tell me I hate networking, I'm like, do you hate the long-term or the mutually beneficial part of the relationships? And they say, oh no, I want that. I don't like cheap wine, stale cheese, and smarmy people giving me business cards. And I'm like, that's sort of not the real definition of it. That's what people have come to think of. And especially, I think, in technology, where many of our listeners work, are in sort of that tech world. So a lot of people pull back. So if someone's listening to this podcast, and when they found out that you and I were going to chat for 25 minutes about networking, they almost hit the skip to next episode button, but they're still here. What advice do you have for them?
Well, it's funny, I ended up trademarking the term NetWORTHing for that reason. And part of what I wrote a book on and talked about was the fact that it's not about working your contacts for leads. It's about how can you be of worth to others, really looking at your own self and saying, how can I be a resource to people, looking for ways to be a resource, expecting nothing in return. So, whatever term what you and I are talking about is not transactional networking. What you and I are talking about is the power of how you can build a very robust network. If you think of people as you're approaching your network, thinking, how can I be a resource for them? I mean, there's a great quote from Zig Ziglar that you and I think both had the chance to meet. And, Zig says you can have anything you want in this world if you help others figure out what they need first.
Yep. And that is so true. And people don't think of it, that they think, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time to help anyone else. But as soon as they need something, they're like, who can help me? And you can't just show up. As I was saying, Becky can't show up with the resume after she got laid off. She had to be there volunteering and participating in that community all the way through. So as people are maybe younger in their careers, maybe some of the younger generation haven't really been given the basic tips beyond likes, links, shares, and follows. Everybody knows how to connect on LinkedIn or how to follow somebody on Instagram. But how do we get back to the basics? If somebody is on the early stages of their career, how do you get back to the basics of establishing these long-term and mutually beneficial connections?
Right. That's a really good point. I just want to make one comment that you said about Becky, that I always like to tell people the worst time to build a network is when you really need one, and being proactive. So let's talk about proactive steps.
Well, really quick, though, let me just say there's that old Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So I always tell people, even if for 30 years you haven't networked, you can start right now.
You can start right now. So I think, for sure that the digital world has changed everything. But what's really fascinating to me is how you really can build connections with people digitally. I mean, more than just the likes, like you're saying, but actually commenting or, direct messaging people or looking at people's LinkedIn profile once they've accepted you. And what do you have in common? Did you go to the same school? Did you used to work at the same place? I mean, there's so much rich information we can learn. And then, figuring out how to be a resource. I've had people that want to connect with me, go look at my LinkedIn profile or looked at what I'm posting on Facebook and then simply realize there's a potential connection or realize they might have a resource for me. I had somebody recently reach out and say, based on what I see you posting on Facebook, I thought that you might really like this resource. I thought of you. Well, I did like the resource. Now I'm like really interested, wanting to talk to this person.
Yeah, they get on your radar screen for sure because they helped you.
They helped. They took a moment to do that. So there's so much that can happen digitally with that. But I think internally, looking at a lot of the listeners that are listening to this podcast that are working in large organizations, really figuring out how can I be a resource to others and looking for opportunities to get exposed to new people within the organization that maybe be outside your division or outside the team that you want to get to know I think you told me you've done a podcast on mentoring, right?
Yes, we did one several months ago with a woman named Marnie Lifshin. So you can go back and find that. We talked all about mentorship.
Because I would listen to that podcast for good tips, but in really looking for how could you be, everybody can be a resource to somebody. I don't care who you are. There's something that you can do or offer. And it could be something very basic. I remember one time, somebody coming up with a great shoe source because I posted about how my feet are always killing me when I'm on site at conferences. And, it's just looking for ways to be a resource to other people and making the point to ask questions and then listen for how you can be a resource.
So you bring up a really interesting point that I think gets overlooked all the time on this networking topic. And that is when people think of networking, they think of external. So they think that's when I need a job, or if I'm in sales, I have to do that. But, if I'm working in a cubicle, I don't have to network. They think it's an external thing that you have to do. But you bring up something super important, and that is the importance of internal networking. Can you talk about why? I can think of 3 or 4 reasons, and I'm sure you have 3 or 4 more, why it's important to build relationships with people inside your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, first of all, for career advancement, right, the opportunity to get to know other divisions or departments or volunteering to be on committees or projects where you're going to get exposed to people from different parts of the company, not only builds your career, but it helps you build your resource and network. Because when you live this way, I always try to get people to kind of do a diagram. You're in the center of your network, you're the hub of your network, and then draw spokes coming from that hub. And each of those spokes represent a different division or a different part of the company that you want to interact with or may interact with, and then challenging yourself to identify 1 or 2 people on those spokes that either you don't know very well or never met at all. And, we could talk about the 6 degrees of separation on that. Most likely the leads that you're going to get for a promotion, for a new opportunity, or to really help you with your career are going to probably come from somebody you don't know very well or never met at all, And that's been proven over and over again for the strength of weak ties. And so that if we just talk to the people that we work with in our team and our division, who are all exposed to the same resources, information, and influences, we never are going to get that new idea. We're never going to get that new perspective. We're never going to get that new career opportunity until we go outside that sphere of influence.
So you bring up something I want to dive into, and that is, and I've heard you mention it before, and I know it comes from a book and a study that was done a few years ago, but I love the way you talk about the strength of weak ties. But before we jump there, there's one more thing I want to add to why I think you have to network internal in the company. I think it's really important because also when someone else gets hired away to a competitor or another industry, it happens so often that they have to build out a department, and they often look back to their either immediate past employer or the one before that, and they think, who was awesome with the skills I need to fill?
Yeah.
And oftentimes someone leaves and they'll see 2 or 3 people get hired away and they're like, why didn't they think of me? Well, because you never left your cubicle. They don't know who you are. So it doesn't just help you while you're inside the company. It helps you get opportunities outside the company when someone else gets promoted up and out.
Absolutely. When I was in outplacement work, Thom, I was involved with, okay, we're going to now go to, I was privy to who was being told that they no longer were needed. And when I would say to the manager, why this person over this person, it was always, we couldn't afford to lose this person. And it was never about their technical skills. It was about, they know everybody.
Everybody in the company loves them.
Everybody has a problem, they call Thom, and we can't afford to cut Thom. Our customers love Thom. Our management loves Thom. We can't afford to cut Thom.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. People do love Thom. No, I'm just kidding. People do keep their jobs for that.
People with that live a life of what I call a NetWORTHing mentality, do not get let go because the company knows they can't afford it. So it's not only a really good strategy for your career.
It's job security.
It's job security. It's also a better way to live your life, because when things come up, health challenges. I mean, my story with going through cancer, and literally when my doctors were saying it's going to be 3 weeks before we can get you into surgery to have a biopsy, I literally went to my network. I'm like, who do I know? And a weak tie, somebody I hadn't talked to in almost 10 years, ended up being the person that got me into somebody the next day. And I could go on and on. It happened through my whole treatment. So if you don't think you need a good network or a diverse network and a more of a network of people that you don't know very well, and you don't think you need that for your career, my story will tell you that you need it for you to save your life.
Well, your story about cancer and people stepping in to help you is, it's just a classic story that when you're involved with other humans, other carbon-based life forms, it's not just about business. Everyone who comes to the table, everybody's got their own stuff. If anyone's ever seen me do my networking talk, I tell the story about how we found the doctor that basically saved my daughter's life. She wouldn't have died, but she would have had some serious problems. And it was through this connections of people who led us to what at the time was the top doctor.
And we connections, right? These were not people you knew really well.
Right, exactly. And sometimes that's the thing. It doesn't have to be your best friend, your neighbor, your brother, your sister, your cousin. Sometimes it's people, whether this business, like finding doctors, like we both have had experiences, or whether it's finding your next job opportunity. It's not necessarily those people who are ingrained with you because they see you a certain way. They know that you're a box, you're this big, and you're blue. And this leads us right into this idea of the strength of weak ties. And I think you describe it better than anybody. So could you walk us through this now that we've kind of walked into it?
Yeah, I think, we're really hitting on it, that it's, I can tell you, and there's all kinds of proven research if you go out there and look for it, that the best ideas, your best ideas, and inventors do this all the time. Inventors do not talk to who they know really well. They go to the four corners of the world. They go to other communities and industry. What are you doing over here that we could take back? In order to get exposed to new ideas, attitudes, and perspectives, you must step out of your sphere of influence of what you're, in other words, your department, your division, where you always are, to get exposed to new ideas. And I can just tell you from the 5 years I coached executives 99.9% got their opportunity through a weak tie. It did not come from someone they knew well. And so often the person you know well says, you know, I know somebody, or, you know, your mentor at work might say, you know, you should talk to Bob over in distribution. I think you guys might have some connection. And maybe it's the person you know well that gets you to that, what I call the second level. But it's that second level, the person that you don't know very well, who either has the golden keys or hands you off to somebody else who's like a third level. And that's where I saw the sweet spot for people getting their unbelievable job opportunities were coming from like that second and third level, people they didn't know very well or never met at all.
But don't you think sometimes people are scared to go talk to those second and third levels? By definition, they're weaker ties. So they're like, I don't want to bother Bob in accounting or whatever it is. You know, what do you tell those people who are like, I don't know if I'm worthy to go talk to Mary Ann?
Right. So definitely, usually it's somebody that has suggested that, or somehow you've been exposed to them. You've run into them at a conference, or you saw them at a meeting, or you met them in the men's room, whatever the case is. But there's something usually that allows you to say, so-and-so suggested, or so-and-so who knows me really thought we should meet up, or I noticed we graduated from the same college, and I just wondered if you'd be interested in potentially grabbing a cup of coffee. And by the way, virtual cup of coffees work really well too. You know, can we jump on and have a quick 10-minute conversation? You never want to ask somebody, can you go to lunch for an hour? I mean, nobody's got lunch hours, but everybody's got 10 minutes. And a lot of times there's a lot that can happen through social channels before it maybe lead to a face-to-face. But what I like to say to people, it's like, what is the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is this person doesn't give you any time or says no. Are you any worse off? I mean, no, you're not. And most likely with the intention of, I really want to get to know you. I would love to see how I could be a resource to you too. You're somebody that's been I've been watching you in the company. I'm so impressed with what you've done. I'd love to have 10 minutes just to learn. Very few people will turn that down. If there's an opportunity, you're showing a connection or a thread as to why you would love to learn from this person and then see how you can be a resource to them. And of course, if there's a connection, if somebody you both know, you want to leverage that. So that person might do the first email. Sarah Michel has recommended you highly to me, and you're copying me on this email, and I'm wondering if you've got 10 minutes to chat. I always like to say a 10-minute call, grab a cup of coffee. Those are very non-threatening ways. Then do you have an hour? Do you have lunch with me? And always, if the person happens to be outside your building or at another part of the campus, you want to always go to them. Make it easy. How can I come to you? And then leverage, if there is a weak connection between that, what is that connection?
And if you do invite them for coffee, buy them their coffee.
Yeah, good point.
I'm surprised. I am surprised how many times people will call and say, can I take you out for coffee? I want to pick your brain about something they want some information about. And then when we get there, you stand in line and they buy their coffee. It's like, wait a minute, you wanted free consulting and I buy my own coffee. So I always tell people, if you're inviting them for coffee, pick up the tab for that $4 cup of coffee. And Sarah, don't you find that most people want to help other people?
I do find that.
Me
I think
too.
People generally want to. I don't believe there's a better feeling than when you help somebody and you find out that 10-minute cup of coffee, that suggestion that you made to go talk to somebody else or to go look at this opportunity, and you find out that helped that person. There's just not a better feeling. But that brings me to another point. If you meet with one of these people and they offer you advice, or they recommend a book, or they tell you that they want you to follow up with this person, and you do those things, you need to follow up and say, I want you to know I followed your advice. I met with Bob. He's amazing. And now we're working together, and I'm coming on his project, and thank you so much. Because that's when the person goes, oh, wow. And then, the next chance of you asking them to do something, they're going to jump right in and say, of course. So, but that's a really important point, Thom, because I can't tell you how many times I've helped people. They've networked, done networking me with me. I'll never forget helping somebody get connected to somebody who I knew was hiring. And 4 weeks later, I'm in the grocery store, I run into that friend who's hiring, and she's like, hey, I just want you to know, your girl, she's like down to number 1 and 2. It's between her and somebody else. And I went, oh, I didn't even know because I never heard back from her. And my friend said, are you kidding me? This is a sales and marketing position, and she never circled back to you?
Yep.
And that person didn't get the job.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. So follow up, circle back. And today's world, my God, it's so easy.
Yeah.
It's an email, it's a text, it's a direct message. But I still preach the handwritten thank you card. I know it's a thing of the past, but.
So let's talk about that, because I don't just preach it. I stand on a soapbox and scream it, that I think the handwritten note really makes a difference. And I was speaking at a technology company in the Silicon Valley. Someone raised their hands and she said, sir, I think you're a little too old and a little too Texan. We don't do that here. And I literally thought about printing a shirt that said a little too old, a little too Texan. And her boss actually stood up and told a story about how all of the Sand Hill Road, all the venture capitalists, they send handwritten notes. And so he didn't dress her down in a bad way, but he said, don't think just because we work in technology that people don't appreciate getting that thank you note. And I always tell people that I talk to this about, that think of it in your own life. What if you did a little favor for somebody, you introduced them to Marianne and they got the job or they got the interview and they sent you a handwritten note. You come into your office and we get all this junk mail, but there's a handwritten note. What do you open first? How would you feel if the person sent you a note that just said, hey, thank you? You'd feel great. So don't cheat other people out of feeling great. It takes you 2 minutes and a 40-cent stamp.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, in today's world, we're bombarded. I mean, the average, inbox is, 200 plus and junk mail filters are super high. And the likelihood you're going to go into a junk mail file is high. And the likelihood you're going to be just not even open is high. Why not differentiate? Why not do something that nobody else is doing? And it's sure, like you said, who sends a handwritten thank you note? I'm going to open this. I mean, when I get them, I put them up in my office like a relic. I have people come look at them, look at that. So I know that we both preach it, but I think the message here is circle back.
Absolutely.
And let people know how you've acted on what they're recommended. They're going to be more likely to want to help you again. And then, it's this whole pay it forward thing. And it's just I'm convinced, and I'm old enough now to have seen this played out for decades, that if you live your life this way, it will not only help your career, it will help you personally in your relationships and friendships. It's a better way to live your life.
So before we close this out, I want to circle back around, because one of the things that you do at Velvet Chainsaw is you work with companies and associations who put on live events. And the Digital Enterprise Society, either puts on some small events, is going to be probably looking at doing some more. And in addition to that, they partner with a lot of people in this digital enterprise industry, if you will. So a lot of people listening to this have the opportunity to attend live events. But some people are like, oh, I have to get on a plane and I have to spend a day or two. So why do you think live events still rock?
Well, simply because of what happens when people are face to face. So social scientists have looked at this for a long time, that if we can share information online, why do we need to go face to face? And what they realize is that what happens when we're face to face, there's eye contact, there's perceptions, the chemistry of what happens when I look at you, I establish trust, rapport building. I'm more likely to share with you what really you need to know about working with this person or working with this company, or what I've really learned on my years, working in digital enterprise. And I'm more likely to give you what's not shared in writing, what's not conveyed, feeling, emotion doesn't get shared on a platform in writing. But when I'm with you face to face and I develop a rapport and I begin to trust you, I form an emotional connection. And there's all kinds of research on this, that this happens. And so when you hear FOMA, right? Fear of missing out is because I decided not to be in person and I'm trying to follow this through Twitter or whatever, and people are talking about these amazing connections that happen and all this stuff, and I can't experience it because I'm not there in person. So there was a time when we thought, oh my God, our live meeting's going to die.
Oh, and in fact, I was just going to say that exact same thing. If you go back 10 years, the association world was worried that it was over, that everybody would just live stream.
It was over. And today, 2000, I can tell you that is not the case. Every single one of our clients are experiencing robust attendance. People are blowing attendance numbers. Everybody's doing well. Now, yeah, the economy's doing good. That's part of it. But also part of it is people see the value of face-to-face. And we're living in a digital world where people aren't even co-working together. And some people aren't in a company meeting. Some people aren't even seeing each other until the annual corporate meeting. And it's like, oh my God. And they're probably, and so what ends up happening when we're face-to-face at that one annual meeting now ends up being, it takes the level of work to the next level. So
what advice do you have for someone who might be going to their first live meeting that maybe they haven't been to one before in this space, and they're going to attend something? What could they do to maximize their networking while they're live at a conference?
Oh my gosh, I have so many ideas, but
it's a half-hour show, so
I know. I'll just get a couple really quick. You can always see who else is coming, right? The attendance list is usually always posted. If it's not, it should be. Go back to the organizer and say we should be posting who's coming, name and title and company. You don't have to give any contact information away. And then look at that list. And first of all, is there people that you know? Second of all, is there people you'd like to know? Look at the agenda of speakers. Look at the topics. Is there people presenting that, oh man, you've been watching them or you've been reading about them, or it's a company you're really fascinated in, and do an outreach, do an email outreach to that person. I'm coming to the meeting. I saw you presenting. Look forward to meeting you. Show up early to their session. Offer to help. Offer to pass out handouts. Offer to room monitor. I mean, there's so many things you can do to put yourself in a situation where you can meet these people and leverage that. And really looking at going to the meeting before you go to the meeting, setting some networking goals. Like who do I really want to meet? What kind of information am I hoping to get exposed to? And think about that. Be very intentional about it. And when you go with those intentions, those opportunities will open up.
So the last thing then is you go to a meeting, you meet some really cool people. I think where people drop the ball most of the time is they never follow up with these people. So they meet them once. And I always say that meeting someone once does not make them part of your network. Meeting someone once makes them someone you have met once. And there's a huge difference between someone you've met once and someone you've established an ongoing relationship with. So how can people follow up?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you meet somebody, you can say, hey, you on LinkedIn, let's connect on LinkedIn, or however you want to have whatever source you want to use. But then, sending something out. So if you talked at the conference about something, about some research, is there an article you have or a link or a book? And then you follow up with that. It was great meeting you last week. We talked about this. Here's a link for you to go further. Or if you do a LinkedIn outreach, you put a comment in there. I don't know how many people just do the connect, and there's an opportunity to say, it was so great meeting you at the conference last week. I really want to keep the connection going, and throw a question out that you want them, to kind of get that. If you look at great bloggers, they're always ending with questions to keep the conversation going, kind of follow that advice. But yeah, you're not, really establishing what are, being clear on who are the people I really want to continue with. If you met 30 people, it's not realistic. Maybe you'll follow up with 30, but what are the ones that you really want to move forward, and then be clear on that.
Yeah, if you don't own the follow-up, it's not going to happen because people get busy, they get back there. But I think people like follow-up. I think people like it when you follow up with them and get to know them. You're not going to have a love connection with everybody, but if you don't follow up with anybody, you won't have any connections. So, Sarah Michel, thank you so much for joining us here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Any last words?
Oh, my pleasure, Thom. It's been very fun. I think people always say to me, how I'm bad at networking, or I don't get networking. I'm really introverted or whatever. And, I think in parting, I just want to say some of the best networthers, people who really practice networthing that I know, are introverted. They really are, because their ability to listen to what and figure out how they can be a resource. And it's not about working the room and passing out the most business cards, but zeroing in on a couple people and connecting deeply with those people is what we're really talking about. So for those of you that think you can't be good at it because you're not extroverted, that's just wrong.
No, in fact, I'm an extrovert. Extroverts have to work extra hard because we're just talking to all these people. We're not thinking and listening as well as the introverts do.
Yeah.
So I actually think that introverts have an advantage if they learn how to do it.
I agree. I think they do. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, if you want to be somebody people want to connect with and build a relationship with, then simply be a person that people want to connect with, build a relationship with. So thanks for having me, Thom. It's been fun.
Oh, it's always fun to talk to you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. Gosh, I hope that you'll join us every week because we always try to have more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.